What if the most valuable thing Drake released was not music at all, but a clock that Universal could not stop? Sit with that for a second. Not a song, not a verse, not a diss, a clock. The thing everyone heard was 3 albums arriving at once. Iceman, Habibti, Maid of Honor. The thing the market heard, or at least thought it heard, was a timing event, a possible contract event, a forced reckoning inside a machine that usually keeps the artist moving one project at a time, one cycle at a time, one recoupment window at a time. So, look, if you came here for the clean social media version, it goes like this. Drake owed Universal Music Group 3 more albums. He released 3 albums in one night. Each project had its own chart identity. The obligation vanished. Universal woke up without its biggest movable asset. Private equity arrived with a $2 billion check. Nice story. Too neat, too clean, too good for the internet not to love. The actual answer is more dangerous because it is less clean. We do not know the private delivery language. We do not know whether the contract counted albums by title, by minimum running time, by commercial standard, by acceptance right, by delivery notice, by recoupment status, by label option, or by some quiet clause buried in a schedule that nobody on the outside will see. We do not know whether the number 3 is legally meaningful or merely narratively perfect. But we know enough to see the machine. And I mean this. The machine is not the rumor. The machine is the fact that a rumor like this can be structurally plausible. 30 years ago, a label contract was built around scarcity. Studio access was scarce. Radio access was scarce. Distribution was scarce. Shelf space was scarce. Retail coordination was scarce. The artist delivered an album because the album was the industrial unit that could pass through those choke points. Press it, ship it, promote it, place it, count it, then do the next one. The label owned the clock because the label owned the bottlenecks. Now the bottleneck moved. The bottleneck is not pressing plants, not Tower Records, not the van to move boxes down the coast. The bottleneck is attention sequencing. The bottleneck is the algorithmic release calendar. The bottleneck is whether a body of work can become a coordinated data event across Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Luminate, Billboard, social commentary, fan reaction channels, and legal speculation before the next object hits the feed. That means time itself became an asset. Not time in the poetic sense, time in the operational sense. The release window, the reporting week, the chart week, the platform placement cycle, the editorial playlist cycle, the contractual delivery cycle, the investor diligence cycle, the lawsuit news cycle. The same 24 hours can be artistic time, accounting time, legal time, and market time. Same day, different clocks, right? That is where the short got its power. It took a fan event and recoded it as balance sheet violence. The average listener hears 3 albums. The business listener hears possible acceleration of deliverables. The label hears cannibalization risk. The investor hears a cash flow reset. The artist hears optionality. The internet hears revenge. Do not skip that last word. Revenge is part of the distribution system now. The music did not merely drop. It arrived inside a frame. Drake versus Kendrick. Drake versus the public. Drake versus the label. Drake versus the machinery that monetized a humiliation. Whether you like Drake does not matter for the business analysis. Actually, that is the wrong way in. Your opinion of Drake is noise. His position in the system is the signal. The hard part is understanding why a 3-album drop feels like an escape hatch at all. In most industries, dumping product quickly is a sign of weakness. In music, under the right conditions, it can be a way to convert creative surplus into legal movement. You take what the system treats as separate objects and compress them into a single night. You force every observer to ask a contract question. You make the chart system, the fan system, the legal system, and the capital system look at the same event through different lenses. That is not just marketing. That is multi-system pressure. A record label wants orderly extraction. It wants a release cycle long enough to monetize promotion, but not so long that the artist loses heat. It wants the star attached to the building. It wants future albums because future albums justify present advances. It wants optionality on the artist's next hot streak. A superstar wants something else. He wants to turn today's heat into tomorrow's bargaining power without giving the counterparty enough time to neutralize the move. There's an old Bond desk phrase people I went to graduate school with used to use. You do not win by predicting the curve. You win by knowing whose clock is wrong. The same applies here. If Universal is pricing Drake as a multi-cycle asset, and Drake can compress cycles faster than the label expected, the dispute is not about taste. It is about duration mismatch. That phrase matters. Duration mismatch. A label advance is a long-dated bet on future output. The artist, once he reaches platform scale, can shorten the duration of his obligation. He can release faster. He can route attention himself. He can turn fan speculation into unpaid legal analysis. He can make the public litigate the contract before the lawyers do. The label may still own rights. The label may still distribute the work. The label may still win in court if there is a dispute, but its informational advantage shrinks, okay? Now add Luminate, add the UPC, add the ISRC, add album equivalent units. Add the way streaming turned songs into measurable streams, streams into weighted album units, and album units into public rank. The public sees a chart. The industry sees a ledger. The contract sees a deliverable only if the private agreement says so. This is where the internet theory becomes half smart and half wrong at the same time. Half smart because separate album registrations can make separate commercial products visible. Half wrong because chart visibility does not automatically equal legal satisfaction. A UPC can make a project count for reporting. It cannot by itself rewrite the acceptance language in a private contract. That is the key. The public accounting layer is legible. The legal layer is hidden. The rumor lives in the gap, and that gap is now content. In the old model, the public did not care about the clause. Fans argued about songs. Lawyers argued about clauses. Accountants argued about recoupment. Radio argued about ads. Those rooms were separate. Now the rooms collapse into one feed. Fans say SoundScan. Lawyers say delivery. Finance people say free cash flow. Bloggers say private equity. Everyone is touching the same elephant, just with different gloves. That collapse is the first hidden mechanism. The modern artist is no longer just a supplier of recordings. He is a public volatility event. The event creates streams. The streams create numbers. The numbers create headlines. The headlines create bargaining power. The bargaining power affects future rights. The future rights affect investor valuation. The investor valuation feeds back into the artist's posture. The loop closes. A label can tolerate arrogance. Labels have worked with arrogance forever. What they cannot easily tolerate is a star who can make the market price his independence in real time. That is why this moment matters, even if the most viral version is wrong. The rumor is the smoke. The fire is that the public can now imagine a world where the artist uses release mechanics to attack the contract itself. That was not supposed to be visible. The label system has always depended on a boring kind of opacity. Advances look like generosity until you understand recoupment. Ownership looks like partnership until you understand master rights. Marketing spend looks like investment until you understand who pays. Catalog value looks like prestige until you understand discounted cash flow. The artist gets fame up front. The institution gets structured claim on the future. Drake is not the first artist to understand this. Frank Ocean showed an earlier version of the move. Deliver one thing to satisfy the old room. Release the real thing into the new room. Different clock. Different counterparty. Different economics. What makes the Drake rumor heavier is scale. Ocean was a high art escape story. Drake is a platform scale stress test. And that's not nothing. Because if the public believes the 3-album drop could be a contractual endgame, the label has already lost one layer of authority. Not necessarily the legal layer, not necessarily the economic layer, the symbolic layer. The public no longer sees the label as the maker of stars. It sees the label as the old bridge the star might burn after crossing. There is a difference between being powerful and being seen as necessary. Labels can remain powerful while becoming less necessary. That is the zone where systems start to wobble. Banks did not vanish when private credit grew. Hotels did not vanish when Airbnb arrived. Taxi companies did not vanish when rideshare arrived. But the market started pricing around them. Music is now facing its version of that. The label still has muscle. The artist has distribution adjacency. Private capital has appetite. Platforms have the user relationship. Fans have the narrative engine. Lawyers have the language. Luminate has the count. No single party owns the whole stack anymore. The triple drop, then, is not just 3 albums. It is a map of fragmentation. It shows a star sitting in the middle of a system where the recording can be counted by one institution, monetized by another, disputed by another, amplified by another, and financed by another. That is the hidden violence in the night. Not that Drake definitely escaped. We do not know that. The violence is that escape became thinkable. Once escape becomes thinkable, the contract changes even before the contract changes. A UPC is not a key. It looks like one because the industry trained everyone to confuse visibility with permission. That is the trap in the short. Each album has its own SoundScan code, the argument says, so each album counts. So the obligation is done. It sounds technical enough to feel true. It has just enough back-office language to pass through social media as secret knowledge. And it is wrong in the precise way viral business analysis is often wrong. It mistakes the tracking layer for the legal layer. The tracking layer is real. Luminate, formerly SoundScan, sits inside the public measurement system. Album products have UPC or EAN identifiers. Individual recordings have ISRC identifiers. Product sales, track sales, premium streams, ad-supported streams, and other activity can be converted into album-equivalent units under chart rules. The system has to turn messy behavior into comparable counts. 1 album sale equals 1 album unit. 10 digital song sales historically equal 1 album unit. Premium streams and ad-supported streams have their own weights. The point is not metaphysics. The point is measurement. But measurement is not acceptance. Acceptance is contract language. Okay? If a private recording agreement says an album must be delivered to the label, accepted by the label, commercially released in good faith, Meet minimum track and running time standards, avoid re-recording restrictions, avoid excluded material, contain newly recorded masters, satisfy sample clearance requirements, and arrive without legal defects, then a barcode does not solve the problem. A barcode is a label on a box. The contract decides whether the box is full. This is the boring room, and the boring room is where the money lives. The public version of music history loves the dramatic maneuver. Prince writing Slave on his face, Frank Ocean releasing Endless and then Blonde, Taylor Swift re-recording her albums, Lil Wayne fighting Cash Money, Megan Thee Stallion fighting over album definitions. These stories enter culture as morality plays, artist versus machine, freedom versus ownership, genius versus clause. But underneath each one is a technical fight over what counts as a unit of performance. The unit is everything. A song is not always a song. A mixtape is not always an album. A visual album may or may not count. A re-recording may be commercially potent and contractually irrelevant. A compilation can count for one purpose and fail for another. A deluxe edition can extend a chart cycle without creating a new obligation. A playlist can capture listening without becoming an album. The vocabulary seems artistic. The consequences are financial. So, look, the Drake Triple Drop sits directly inside that tension. If the projects are separate commercial albums, they can be separately measured. If they are registered under an exclusive license to Republic Records, a division of Universal Music Group Recordings, then the public metadata still points toward the label system, not away from it. If the number of albums Drake owes has not been publicized, then the clean 3-album theory is inference, not fact. The theory may be right, it may be wrong. The point is that outsiders are reading metadata like archaeologists because the contract itself is sealed. That is how opacity creates myth. One of my old colleagues used to say that a contract is not a document. It is a machine for deciding whose version of reality wins when the room gets expensive. I keep coming back to this. The machine does not care what fans think an album is. It cares what the parties agreed an album is. That definition might be buried in page 4, it might be in a rider, it might be in a later amendment, it might be in a side letter. It might treat a delivered album differently from a commercially released album. It might give the label cure rights. It might give the artist approval rights. It might give the label the right to reject material that is not commercially satisfactory. It might not. The public does not know. And because the public does not know, the public substitutes systems it can see. Chart codes, Spotify pages, Apple Music pages, Luminate counts, Billboard ranks, copyright metadata, label credits, Instagram captions, lyrics about wanting to be free. Those visible objects become proxy evidence. Some are useful, some are noise. The internet then stacks the proxies into a verdict. This is not stupidity. It is a rational response to sealed information. When the formal system hides the decisive document, the informal system overreads the available traces. That is why the SoundScan language matters. It is not just a mistake. It is a symptom. People want a handle. SoundScan gives them one. The handle is not attached to the legal door, but it feels attached. There is a second layer. Chart measurement and contract delivery often move in opposite directions. Chart systems want comparability and anti-gaming rules. Labels want monetization and control. Artists want flexibility and completion. Platforms want engagement. Fans want narrative. A release can be perfect for one system and inconvenient for another. 3 separate album pages may create visible product separation. They may also split attention, dilute first-week dominance, confuse playlist strategy, and make critics treat the output as sprawl. The same move can help the legal theory and hurt the cultural reception. That is why this was never simply a victory lap. If it was a contract move, it had a con. A 3-album drop floods the listener. It makes digestion impossible. It turns art into paperwork in the eyes of a certain critic. It may reduce the chance that one definitive album becomes the comeback narrative. But if the hidden goal is optionality, that cost may be rational. You do not optimize the same way when the scoreboard changes, right? A normal album rollout asks, how do we maximize this project's cultural life? A contractual acceleration asks, how do we minimize the time between remaining obligations and future freedom? Those questions produce different behavior. The first favors focus, the second favors compression. The first loves scarcity, the second loves throughput. The first wants one clean story, the second can tolerate mess if the mess moves the clock. This is where labels get trapped by their own legacy assumptions. The album obligation was invented in a slower system. It assumed production cycles, promotion cycles, radio cycles, retail cycles, touring cycles, and consumer attention cycles had friction. The artist could not easily deliver 3 market-sized projects in one night because the infrastructure could not absorb it. Now the infrastructure can absorb almost anything. Platforms do not need shelves, they need files, metadata, rights, and routing. The physical bottleneck died. The legal language may not have fully caught up. That is a nightmare for institutional counterparties. Not because every artist can do this, most cannot. Most artists releasing 3 albums in one night would simply disappear faster. But a small number of superstar artists can convert oversupply into spectacle. Drake is one of them, Taylor Swift is one, Bad Bunny is one. Beyonce is one. The list is short. For those artists, volume does not behave normally. Volume becomes a signal of abundance. It says, I have more inventory than your calendar can discipline. The label's old answer was control the channels. The new answer is control the terms. That means future superstar deals will likely tighten the definition of album. Minimum marketing cooperation, minimum separation between albums, label acceptance standards, anti-dumping language, delivery pacing, no artificial stacking, no release designed primarily to satisfy obligations without commercially reasonable promotion. Maybe those terms already exist in some deals. Good lawyers are not new. But every public stress test teaches the next lawyer where the old language was soft. This is how celebrity events rewrite contract templates. An artist does not need to win a court case to change the next deal. He only needs to expose a weakness that lawyers can bill against. The industry sees the tactic, whether real or imagined, and the clause gets rewritten. There are partners at entertainment law firms who will eat for years on this kind of ambiguity. I'm being slightly unfair. Not very. Now, consider the Luminate layer again. It is tempting to treat UPC registration as a weapon because it is visible and mechanical, but the deeper weapon is not the code. It is the ability to create simultaneous validity across multiple bureaucracies. The album exists for fans. It exists for platforms. It exists for charts. It exists for the label. It exists for copyright administration. It exists for royalty accounting. It exists for press coverage. Each bureaucracy asks a different question. Is it released? Is it monetizable? Is it trackable? Is it licensable? Is it acceptable? Is it recoupable? Is it a new album? Those questions sound similar to outsiders. They are not similar. A system can answer yes to 6 and no to 1, and the one no can be the only answer that matters. That is why the clean short is dangerous. It teaches the public the right instinct but the wrong proof. The instinct is that identifiers and delivery mechanics matter. Correct. The proof is that a SoundScan code settles the contract. No. The actual answer is that the code makes the move legible. The contract decides whether the move works. The capital market decides what the possibility is worth. That last sentence is the bridge to the bigger story. Because the real buyer of this narrative may not be the fan. It may not even be universal. It may be the investor watching the artist prove that he can create a global liquidity event without traditional pacing. If you are private capital and you are trying to underwrite an artist as an asset, you do not only care about songs, you care about control over timing, you care about whether the artist can make demand show up on command. Drake just showed, at minimum, that he can make the world run a contract analysis overnight. That has value. 2022. Universal Music Group confirms an expansive, multifaceted Drake agreement. Recordings, publishing, merchandise, visual media. The public hears a big celebrity deal. The finance room hears a cross-collateralized attention stack. That is the phrase I would use. The attention stack. A modern superstar is not a recording artist in the old accounting sense. He is a bundle of correlated revenue streams attached to a personality that can be activated across platforms. Recorded music drives streaming. Streaming keeps catalog alive. Catalog drives licensing. Licensing supports brand equity. Brand equity sells merchandise. Merchandise rides touring. Touring feeds social proof. Social proof raises platform priority. Platform priority feeds streaming again. The loop is ugly when you draw it on a whiteboard, but it is why the check gets large. The label does not pay $400 million, give or take, because it loves albums. It pays because it wants claim on the ecosystem around albums. This is where people get sentimental and lose the thread. They talk about exploitation, and sometimes they are right. They talk about freedom, and sometimes they are right. But a label at universal scale is not primarily a villain in a cape. It is a capital allocator inside a rights machine. It advances money against future cash flows. It spends on marketing because it expects to recover through rights. It signs artists not only to sell music, but to defend market share against Spotify, Apple, YouTube, TikTok, Sony, Warner, private equity funds, sovereign capital, and the artist's own ability to become a mini-label. The label is not simply trying to own art. It is trying to own certainty. Okay? Streaming made music revenue look more Bond-like. Not perfectly. Do not overstate it. Songs decay. Taste shifts. Platform rules change. Stars fall off. Catalogs age differently. But compared with the old physical sales model, streaming creates recurring data. Monthly plays, geographic curves, playlist ads, skip rates, completion rates, subscription revenue pools, ad-supported revenue pools, rights shares. It turns culture into cash flow history. Cash flow history attracts capital that does not care about culture as culture. It cares about yield. That is why music catalogs move from sentimental trophies to institutional assets. Blackstone, Sony, GIC, Hypnosis, Primary Wave, Cobalt, Concord, BMG. Different strategies, same gravitational field. If a song can be modeled, financed, bought, sold, securitized, and optimized, then the artist is no longer only competing with other artists. The artist is competing with the capital structure around the song. This is the part most fans cannot see. A label deal and a catalog acquisition are cousins. One buys or licenses future output. The other buys existing rights. One is forward risk. The other is historical yield. One is venture-like. The other is closer to infrastructure finance. Superstar deals increasingly sit between the two. Drake is not just a creator of future music. He is also a living catalog extension engine. Every new controversy drives old streams. Every new album revives old playlists. Every lawsuit headline drags the catalog back into the feed. Every rivalry makes the archive liquid again. That is why the feud mattered economically. Not morally. Economically. The Kendrick fight did something strange. It damaged Drake's symbolic position while increasing the market's need to measure him. He became weaker and more visible at the same time. That is a very specific condition. A star who has been publicly wounded but remains commercially huge becomes volatile collateral. The label still makes money. The platforms still make money. The critics smell blood. Fans defend. Opponents mock. The asset becomes noisy, but noise is not the same as decline. In some markets, noise is liquidity. A music executive understands this even if he would never say it that way on an earnings call. Conflict raises consumption. Bad press can move streams. Reputation damage can hurt brand deals while helping engagement. The label is paid on activity, not dignity. That does not mean the label wants every kind of damage. A real scandal can kill value, but rap beef sits in the gray zone where humiliation and monetization can travel together. And that's not nothing. The Drake lawsuit against Universal made that gray zone explicit. Drake did not sue Kendrick directly in the main defamation action. He sued the institution that distributed and allegedly promoted the record. A court later dismissed the suit, ruling in substance that the contested statements functioned as non-actionable opinion in the context of a heated rap battle. Legal outcome aside, the structure of the complaint revealed the conflict that the industry usually hides. A label can have economic exposure to both sides of a fight. That is the knife in both hands problem. Universal can be the home of Drake and also benefit from Kendrick's success. The conglomerate does not experience loyalty the way a fan does. It experiences portfolio return. If artist A and artist B are both inside or adjacent to the same major label economy, then the institution can monetize conflict that each artist experiences as existential. Fans personalize it. The label consolidates it. This is not conspiracy. It is portfolio logic. Think about a warehouse with two tenants fighting over the loading dock. The landlord does not need to love either tenant. He needs the dock busy and the rent paid. That is too crude, but it gets the shape. The label owns or administers pieces of the dock. The platforms own the road. The artist owns the crowd outside. Private equity wants to buy the toll booth. Everybody says culture. Everybody means cash flow by Tuesday. I'm being slightly unfair, but only slightly. Now put the 3-album drop inside that picture. If Drake is still releasing under an exclusive license to Republic, then the move is not a clean exit from the label system at the moment of release. It is a release through the system. That matters. The public wants the board flip story. The metadata points to a more complex reality. Drake may be trying to create future exit optionality while still operating inside the distribution architecture he wants to outgrow. That is not contradiction. That is transition. Most exits from infrastructure require using the infrastructure one last time. You drive on the bridge to leave the town. You use the old distributor to generate the data that makes the new investor comfortable. You use the label's rails to prove you can move without needing the label's calendar. If the move works, the old system becomes the evidence used to finance the new system. That is why a possible private equity offer, even if unverified, belongs in the analysis. Not as confirmed news, as a market fantasy with teeth. The fantasy says a superstar with enough direct demand can be financed like an operating company. Advance against future masters, advance against publishing, advance against touring economics, advance against brand revenue, advance against data, replace label capital with institutional capital, keep more ownership, hire distribution as a vendor, build the artist as an independent rights platform. Will that work? For most artists, no. For one or two at the top, maybe. For Drake specifically, the answer depends on control of rights, term structure, existing obligations, tax, management, distribution, platform relationships, touring economics, brand risk, and whether the capital provider wants passive yield or operating influence. The $2 billion number may be fantasy, but the category is real. Music rights have become institutional. Artist-level financing was always going to follow. The label's problem is that its own success made this possible. Universal helped build Drake into one of the most measurable artists on earth. Measurement lowers financing friction. Financing alternatives lower label dependence. Lower label dependence raises the price of retention. The better the label proves the artist works, the easier it becomes for someone else to underwrite him. That is the institutional irony. In venture capital, the best portfolio companies eventually do not need you. In private credit, the best borrowers refinance you. In music, the best artists can become the platform. Risk the label cannot cheaply replace. If you are Universal, you want Drake big enough to generate global revenue, but not so structurally independent that your capital becomes optional. There is a sweet spot. Superstar scale pushed him past it. The public thinks the fight is over albums. The deeper fight is over who gets to discount the future cash flows of the artist. Once you see that, the 3 albums stop looking like a stunt. They look like a data room opening. Lucian Grange is not a character in a rap song. He's a portfolio manager with a media company wrapped around him. That sounds colder than people want it to sound. Good. It should. The fan model of the music business assumes relationship. Artist signs with label. Label backs artist. Artist wins. Label wins. Everyone drinks champagne near a plaque on the wall. Sometimes that is close enough to true. At the top of the industry, it is too simple to be useful. A major label does not manage one artist. It manages a portfolio of rights, releases, priorities, conflicts, territories, market share goals, and capital commitments. It does not wake up asking, how does Drake feel? It wakes up asking, where is growth? Where is risk? Where is bargaining power? Where is margin? Where is release schedule pressure? Where are platform negotiations? Where are the hits? Now place Drake and Kendrick inside that portfolio logic. The cultural world sees enemies. The corporate world sees valuable assets moving through overlapping pipes. The beef becomes a consumer spectacle and a back-office complexity at the same time. If the institution has an economic relationship to both sides, the neutrality is not emotionally neutral. It is financially loaded. That is the portfolio betrayal problem. The artist experiences betrayal as personal. The conglomerate experiences conflict as activity across assets. Those are not reconcilable worldviews. The artist says, why did the machine help weaponize this against me? The institution says, we distribute creative expression, we promote successful records, we do not referee rap battles as moral courts. A federal judge, in dismissing Drake's defamation suit, leaned toward the context of opinion inside a heated battle. The legal question may be resolved one way. The trust question remains. Right? Trust is not an abstract value in superstar deals. Trust is a financial input. A star who thinks his label will monetize his humiliation differently prices the next deal. He demands more money, more control, more approval, more audit rights, more carve-outs, shorter terms, better exit language, or he leaves if he can. The label may win the lawsuit and still pay more for the broken relationship. That is why the lawsuit mattered even after dismissal. It converted private distrust into public documentation. Courts decide claims. Markets remember frictions. There is a quiet reason large institutions hate this kind of public dispute. It teaches the next counterparty where the institution is vulnerable. It tells other artists, the label's portfolio may not love you back. It tells private capital, there may be a relationship fracture that can be financed. It tells platforms, the artist's direct audience may be separable from label loyalty. It tells lawyers, draft around this. It tells managers, negotiate now. The actual answer is that Drake did not need to prove Universal wrong in court to create strategic pressure. He needed to make Universal's dual role visible. This is where the music business starts to look like banking. A bank can be lender, underwriter, market maker, advisor, and creditor across different clients. The conflicts are managed through walls, disclosures, committees, and rules. The public still gets angry when the same institution appears on too many sides of a trade. Labels have a softer version of the same problem. They are cultural banks. They finance, distribute, administer, promote, and own claims across artists whose interests can collide. When the collision is small, nobody cares. When the collision becomes the biggest public rap battle in years, the structure becomes visible. You can feel why Drake would want out if the lyrics cited by critics are sincere. You can also see why Universal would not want to let a global asset walk cheaply. Both positions are rational. That is what makes the conflict hard. This is not a Saturday morning cartoon with one smart artist and one dumb corporation. It is two rational actors operating under different definitions of damage. For the artist, reputational damage is existential. For the label, reputational damage is a variable in the revenue model unless it crosses a threshold. For the artist, humiliation is a wound. For the label, humiliation can be demand. For the artist, loyalty is memory. For the label, loyalty is contract performance plus future option value. These are different species of truth, and I mean this. The most dangerous disputes happen when both sides are telling the truth in languages the other side cannot accept. Now add the 3 albums. If Drake had only released Iceman, everyone would have argued about whether the music restored him after Kendrick. By releasing 3 projects, he shifted the question from taste to structure. Is this a comeback? Is this a dump? Is this an obligation? Is this freedom? Is this revenge? Is this oversupply? Is this a negotiation? The move overwhelmed the critic's first question. That alone is strategic. A wounded artist often tries to win back the court of public opinion. A structurally aware artist tries to change the court. That is what the triple drop did. It forced listeners to stop judging only quality and start judging motive. Motive is sticky. Motive keeps the analysis alive after the song's end. Motive recruits business channels, legal channels, finance channels, hip-hop channels, gossip channels, and reaction channels into the same release. One album asks for reviews, 3 albums ask for theories. Theories are distribution, okay? The hidden advantage of theory-driven distribution is that it lowers the artist's need for traditional explanation. Drake does not need to announce, "I'm in a contract struggle." He can release enough clues for the audience to build the contract struggle around him. Lyrics about wanting freedom, 3 separate project identities, prior legal dispute, reported megadeal history, metadata under Republic. The audience does the assembly. That is more powerful than a press release because it feels discovered. Discovered information travels differently from announced information. This is the same reason leaked documents have a charge that official statements lack. A statement asks to be believed. A trace asks to be decoded. Traces create labor in the observer. Once the observer works, he owns the conclusion emotionally. He becomes less a viewer than a participant in the investigation. That is the viral engine behind the short. It made people feel they had found the mechanism, even if the mechanism was overstated. The overstating is not incidental. It is part of how modern business narratives spread. Accurate complexity is slower than compressed certainty. The short compresses. Drake owed 3 albums. 3 dropped. Deal done. 2 billion next. Hostile takeover. That is narratively perfect and evidentiary weak. The analyst's job is not to sneer at the compression. The job is to reverse engineer why that compression found such a receptive market. The receptive market exists because people already distrust labels. They already believe artists get trapped. They already know enough about masters, publishing, and advances to suspect the official story. They already saw Taylor Swift turn ownership pain into an industrial re-recording campaign. They already saw Frank Ocean's Def Jam exit become folk legend. Drake enters a narrative field already prepared for escape. This is how old grievances become new evidence. Every industry has a myth bank. Music's myth bank is full of artists beating labels, labels cheating artists, contracts written by sharks, masters stolen by suits, genius trapped by accounting. Some myths are true, some are half true, some are useful distortions, but once a new event arrives, the myth bank supplies interpretation faster than facts can. Drake did not have to invent the frame, he only had to activate it. There is a lesson here for Universal and every other major label. The next superstar negotiation is not only about money, it is about narrative risk. If the artist can plausibly tell the world he is escaping you, your contract becomes reputationally expensive to enforce. You may still enforce it, you may still win, but every enforcement action becomes part of the artist's liberation story. That changes the cost of being right. My advisor, gone a long time now, used to say the market does not only price facts, it prices facts after they have passed through shame. Strange line. I did not understand it when I was younger. I understand it now. Universal may have the facts. Drake may have the shame story. Private capital may have the term sheet. Fans may have the myth. The next stage is not decided by who has the loudest song. It is decided by which claim on the future becomes cheapest to finance. That is a colder game than rap beef. The $2 billion offer is not the fact. It is the hallucination that tells you what the market is hungry to believe. That distinction matters. There is no reliable public proof, as of this package, that a private equity firm has placed $2 billion in front of Drake. Social media repeats the number because the number solves the story emotionally. It makes the escape complete. Label deal, triple drop, free agent, private equity, richest artist, revenge. The arc closes too neatly, but finance is often revealed by the rumors it finds believable. Why does $2 billion not sound insane to people anymore? 10 years ago, it would have sounded like parody. Now it sounds high, maybe suspicious, but not impossible in the imagination. That is the shift. Music rights have been pulled into institutional capital. Catalogs have traded for hundreds of millions. Large funds have built music rights vehicles. Sony Music Publishing agreed to acquire Blackstone's Recognition Music Group catalog, a portfolio of more than 45,000 songs, with reported value between $3.5 and $4 billion. Once that kind of transaction sits in the market, the artist as platform question changes. If old songs can be financed like infrastructure, can a living superstar be financed like a growth asset with catalog downside protection? That is the end game. Not every artist. Stop there before the model gets stupid. Most artists do not have the data, audience catalog durability, brand scale, or operating discipline to support that kind of underwriting. The average artist is still dependent on advances, distributors, managers, touring, playlists, and luck. The average artist cannot replace Universal with Blackstone. The top 0.01% might be different. Drake is in that tiny zone where the comparison becomes tempting. He has global catalog depth. He has release command power. He has controversy liquidity. He has platform familiarity. He has a brand broad enough to carry rap, R&B, dance, diaspora signals, luxury signals, grievance signals, meme signals, and Toronto identity in one body. That does not automatically make him worth $2 billion. It makes him underwritable in a way most artists are not. And I mean this. The investor would not be buying songs. The investor would be buying a machine that can make songs matter. That machine has components, existing catalog, cash flows, future release rights, touring economics, merchandise, sponsorship, visual media, name, image, and likeness opportunities, publishing shares, master ownership or licensing rights, distribution terms, data access, fan relationship, social reach, crisis risk, insurance, estate planning, tax roading, jurisdiction, management competence, platform relationships. Every component gets a haircut. Every risk gets priced. Every control right gets negotiated. Okay? The label model bundles many of those functions. Private capital would try to unbundle them. Instead of one major label writing a giant all-in deal across recordings, publishing, merchandise, and visual media, a capital partner could finance specific rights or revenue streams while the artist hires best-in-class vendors. Distribution becomes a service. Marketing becomes a campaign buy. Merch becomes an operating partner. Publishing becomes administration. Touring becomes a separate financing package. The artist becomes the holding company. This is the sentence the music business does not want to say out loud. The superstar is becoming structurally capable of being his own conglomerate. Not emotionally, structurally. The barrier is not fame. Many famous people cannot operate companies. The barrier is governance. Can the artist maintain release discipline? Can the team clear samples? Can the rights be audited? Can the data be trusted? Can the catalog be separated from existing claims? Can disputes be contained? Can brand risk be insured? Can a lender step in if the asset melts down? Can the artist accept covenants without feeling owned by a new master wearing a nicer suit? There is the catch. Private equity is not freedom. It is a different cage with better lighting. A label takes rights and gives infrastructure. A private equity firm gives capital and takes control provisions. Maybe not creative control on paper, but covenants are control. Reporting rights are control. Approval over material transactions is control. Debt service is control. Security interests are control. If the artist misses targets, the money gets colder. If controversies damage revenue, the model reprices. If the fund has limited partners expecting a return, the artist is no longer fighting a label executive. He is fighting a capital structure. That may still be better. It may be much better. But do not confuse independent with unconstrained. The better framing is not Drake bypasses the label system. The better framing is Drake may be testing whether label capital can be replaced by financial capital while keeping distribution modular. That is a much sharper claim, less viral, more accurate. The label used to be the bank, the factory, the wholesaler, the promoter, and the gatekeeper. Now each role can be separated. Once roles separate, the artist can shop them. Shopping the roles is the hostile takeover. Not hostile in the legal corporate sense, hostile in the institutional sense. The artist is taking functions that once lived inside the label and forcing them into a market. Who gives me the cheapest capital? Who gives me the cleanest distribution? Who gives me the best data? Who gives me the shortest term? Who lets me own the upside? Who does not get paid forever because they believed in me once when I was cheaper? That last sentence is the moral engine of the whole thing. Labels want to be paid for early belief. Artists want to stop paying once the belief is no longer scarce. Both positions make sense. The label says, we took risk. The artist says, I became the asset. The label says, we built infrastructure around you. The artist says, I can rent infrastructure now. The label says, we advanced capital. The artist says, capital has become a commodity. The label says, we made the market. The artist says, I bring the market with me. There is no clean moral answer there, only bargaining power. The Drake moment, if we strip away the rumor foam, is a bargaining power signal. It says a superstar can flood the zone, activate global attention, create legal speculation, make fans discuss UPCs and contract obligations, remind investors of his cash flow command, and make the label look like a counterparty rather than a patron. That is not a small shift. That is a status inversion. The label used to stand above the artist as the institution that made him legible. Now the artist can make the label legible as a balance sheet participant. Once fans start saying Universal Music Group, like they say Spotify, Apple, Sony, Blackstone, Republic, Luminate, the label has been dragged from backstage to center stage. Backstage institutions hate center stage. Center stage brings blame, right? There is also a second-order risk for labels. If the largest artists can threaten alternative financing, the middle tier gets more expensive too. Not because every middle-tier artist can leave, but because managers will import superstar clauses into smaller negotiations, audit rights, shorter terms, distribution carve-outs, catalog reversion, release pacing, no indefinite options, better definitions of album, better treatment of deluxe versions and visual albums. One superstar stress test becomes a bargaining template across the market. This is how bargaining power migrates, slowly. Then, in the next deal memo, the next major label defense will be scale. They will say, correctly, that global promotion is hard. Playlist relationships matter. Radio still matters in certain formats. Sync is relationship-driven. International coordination is not a weekend project. Data pipes are not simple. Legal clearance is brutal. Crisis management is real. Most artists will fail if they confuse audience with infrastructure. Correct. But the top artists are not asking whether infrastructure matters. They're asking why the infrastructure must own so much of the upside. That question is lethal. A distribution company can move files, a marketing agency can buy attention, a publisher can administer, a private lender can advance capital, a merch partner can operate inventory, a touring partner can scale shows, a manager can coordinate, a data room can show performance. The label's integrated bundle still has value, but its monopoly on the bundle is weaker. The superstar can disassemble the bundle and rebid the parts. That is the thing people should take from the Drake story. Not that he definitely ended his deal in 24 hours. Not that a $2 billion offer definitely exists. Not that Universal was tricked by a barcode. Those are the cartoon shapes. The real story is that the recorded music contract is being pulled apart by the same forces that pulled apart banking, media, retail, and software. Distribution separated from ownership, capital separated from operations, audience separated from gatekeepers, data separated from mystique. Once that happens, the old institution does not vanish. It becomes one bidder among several. A final image. Imagine a freight train outside Newark, stopped in the dark, all those containers stacked too high. Nobody in the passing car knows which container holds cheap furniture, which one holds medical devices, which one holds counterfeit handbags, which one holds machine parts. From the outside, they're all boxes. The value is in the routing, the paperwork, the claims, the destination, the party entitled to the goods. Albums now look like that. Iceman, Habibti, Maid of Honor, boxes moving through a rights yard. The public sees covers, the platforms see files, Luminate sees identifiers, Universal sees licensed product, Drake sees time, investors see possible yield, lawyers see definitions, fans see a man trying to leave. Maybe he did. Maybe he did not. We will find out through filings, metadata, earnings hints, future releases, and the way the next check is written. But the important thing already happened. The audience learned to look at the box and ask who owns the root.